All right, guys. This is our next battles that we're going to be discussing. Remember, we ended off with Chancellorsville, and Chancellorsville focused specifically on the loss of Stonewall Jackson, how he was killed in friendly fire, which basically was a turning point of the war for the Confederacy in a negative way. Today, we're going to be talking about the Battle of Shiloh, which is super important because it basically takes place near the Mississippi River and the railroad system in which Grant was looking to actually capture. Because if you're able to control the Mississippi, you're able to control the flow of the war, you're able to send specific troops up and down the river, as well as the railroad system. You're able to send specific supplies up and down the river in a faster motion than you would if you were just doing it by foot. So, very important. Ulysses S. Grant is going to eventually meet Sidney Johnston, as well as the prolific figurehead of Robert E. Lee. Basically, in this general area, what ends up happening is there's two battles that are fought. There are smaller battles that are fought before Shiloh. Fort Henry and Fort Danielson are those specific battles. We don't necessarily really talk about them a lot. Fort Henry is basically fought in the water. And then Fort Danielson is another like combo specific battle that was looking to again control the Mississippi. What is important about this is we finally see the South kind of falter in a way in which they start disagreeing with one another. They don't have each other's backs when it comes to the battle. People start dropping the ball. Specifically, when we look at this, if you look to the fifth bullet point, it says taxes include General Grant, which is Ulysses S. Grant calling up on General Buell's army, Beauregard to outnumber and retreats. And that's exactly what they ended up being able to do. Grant was starting to become overwhelmed by Lee's forces and Beauregard's forces and Bragg and all the other commanding officers there. And those specific officers within the Confederacy weren't necessarily seeing the larger picture that Grant was seeing. He was able to get the backup that he needed through Buell, and they're able to push the Confederacies back and take control of the river. And that's exactly what they did. So when we look specifically at the battle, you can see how it was kind of designed. Johnston was here, having Bragg, who's going to be another individual that we'll be talking about when we get to Gettysburg next week, pushing in on Grant. If you see, Johnston does have the high ground here. They're pushing down on Grant's men. Grant is inevitably starting to become overwhelmed by the forces of Beauregard, but they're able to get some backup from Buell and Grant, as well as Wallace, Sherman, who we'll talk a lot about. Sherman's March to the Sea end up pushing Beauregard back and taking control of the river. That's my son. You can say hello. Now, the next one we're going to be talking about is Vicksburg, okay, which is Grant and Pemberton. Okay, so Vicksburg is another battle where we start to see again the Union taking control of the war itself. So Grant had won at Big Black Bridge, Champions Hill. Okay, so Pemberton had really no choice into to retreat in defense of Vicksburg, and that's basically what Grant wanted. He had him kind of surrounded. He laid siege on the area of Vicksburg. Vicksburg is kind of interesting because it's kind of set in like a hillside. So when we looked at like Pemberton's men, they were kind of like in the hillside in a sense, trying to hide away from the cannon fire, mortar fire that was being constantly bombarded by Grant. Grant's using an old tactic here. Basically, they had a 47-day siege on this, which would not only kill people through the siege of obviously the exploding cannon fire and mortars, but what it would also do is it basically run their supplies dry. So, sorry about that. Run the supplies dry. So what ends up happening is Pemberton has no other reason but to stop this siege and save whatever men he can save, and eventually he basically gives up to Grant. If we look at the numbers, they're pretty equal, 806 to 805 when it comes to the deaths. Wounded Union are going to have more, but if you look at the missing and captured, 164 missing, captured on the Confederate sides, you're looking close to 30,000 men. So again, a very important battle. And then we look down here. Sorry, I'll zoom up a little bit. After the surrender of Pemberton on July, the Mississippi River was firmly in the hands of the Union and Confederacy, and basically they're able to split the forces up into two, which was not going to be good for Lee and his men. Okay, so as I told you guys, kind of Vicksburg's in this cannon, kind of hillside. Grant's just completely bombarding them, even though they do have the high ground. They're not able to leave anywhere because at this point in time, the Mississippi River, especially right here, is controlled by the Union with their ships. So there's no escape. So eventually, after the 47-day siege on Vicksburg, Pemberton is going to have to give up. All right, we're going to stop here for today. This is kind of a shorter one. What we will be doing next week is we're going to be discussing very in-depth Gettysburg, which is a 3-day battle and the most important battle of the Civil War. So look for notes for that, and I'll talk to you guys soon.